Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. You just joined SheCanCode's International Women in Engineering Day, working as an engineer in tech taster session. To celebrate International Women in Engineering Day, we're hosting this taster session by showcasing the opportunities in tech engineering to inspire and encourage aspiring engineers. So for those tuning in who aren't familiar with us, SheCanCode is a global community with a mission to close the tech gender gap. We use content, marketing and events to engage, inspire and attract more diverse communities to the tech sector. Now, before we get started, please note that we have a live Q&A session running today, so please submit your questions throughout and we will try and get to them at the end. Now, I have some incredible speakers with me today who have kindly given up their time to share their stories and expertise with us. So I am going to stop speaking and hand over to our experts for the day. So we're going to kick off with our first speaker, Lane from AXA. Welcome, Lane. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here today. So I'm going to be a bit of an unusual start off, I guess, because I've only been in the tech industry for about 7 years. So today I worked at AXA for about a year, and before that I worked at a subsidiary of Boeing that made UAVs. And I tend to work in this sort of machine learning, deep learning area. And more recently at AXA, I'm getting to work on our perception systems and validation of our perception systems, and really, really exciting work that I love. So as I said, I've only been in tech for about 7 years. I switched over from archaeological science in my early 30s. And that's what I really want to talk to you a little bit about today, is how I made that switch, what I found useful, the fact that you can make that switch and it can be incredible. So what do I do today though? So I've said I do deep learning. The types of things I do in a day, it's really varied, you know. I'm coding, I'm mainly Python, a little bit of C++. So I get to do my own work. I get to do code review with other people. That's very different from academia. I'm working on a collaborative code base that everyone is, we're all going in the same direction. I get to work on keeping up with the literature for deep learning, figuring out not so much what's interesting research for research's sake, but what does the business need? What can we use to make our problems solvable, our customers happier, our time more efficient? I work quite a lot of work, actually, not so much on training the models, although that is very important, but a surprising amount of work goes into making those models replicable, understanding what you did when you were training them, how you can debug them when they go wrong, and really, really data handling. So I didn't expect this at all when I started working in deep learning, but I think unless you are lucky enough to work at a company that has a really robust data system, or if you are at a company that's constantly at the cutting edge, you are going to have to find your own data for the problems that you're working on. This isn't so much the case at AXA. It was the case where I worked before, because I was really working on prototyping projects. And there was a lot of time spent talking to experts, figuring out what data we had, figuring out how to track that data, how to be able to use it in the machine learning. And I would say on some of the projects I worked on, that was easily 70% of my time. So unexpected, but really, really fascinating. You get to talk to absolute experts in their fields about how their parts of the system work and figure out how to translate that into something that you can actually help them solve a problem. So I loved being able to do that. And one of the great things about tech, about AI, about coding in general, is that you can work on so many interesting problems. There are many, many applications. So, but I did tease that I came into this from a very, let's say, an alternate route. So I did my undergrad in physics and decided that I wanted to do something I was a bit more passionate about, and ended up getting a PhD in archaeological science and 2 postdocs. And when I was doing that, I loved it. I loved it, but there aren't that many people who will hire an archaeologist in the world. And so I transferred into industry. And I really, with the last few minutes, want to highlight a few big points. So the first one is transferable skills are huge. They're more useful than you think. You have more of them than you think. So basic familiarity with what you want to do is great. Like, yes, if you want to work in Python, know a bit of Python. If you want to work in ML, experiment with some ML frameworks. But a lot of what you need to know, you're going to pick up on the job. Like anywhere you go, no matter how experienced you are, you're going to pick up more things on the job because every place is so different. So willingness to learn, willingness to communicate, to work collaboratively, they're huge. They're absolutely huge. And when you're looking for jobs, you really need to think carefully about what you can offer. Maybe it's not exactly what they're asking for, but if you can show that you've taken the time to see what's relevant in your past and really spin it to tell them why you could help them with your slightly different past, it really impresses people. So for me as an archaeologist, I spent years learning to gather the correct data, design good experiments, examine my assumptions. I really developed a deep understanding for good software by writing tons of terrible software. And if you're early in your career, how did you do with your teammates on group projects? How did you work with your supervisor? These are all huge. Everyone has applicable skills. I can't tell you how many colleagues I've had in archaeology who said, how could I do something different? It's never true. It's never true. Also, you know, it's difficult, but try to be a little bit patient with the job market, be patient with yourself. Honestly, not all jobs are going to be willing to support somebody who is transferring, who is early in their career. You can make more of them more willing by showing that you are excited to learn, showing that you do have something to offer, but some of them just might not be interested. Use your networks. Don't get discouraged. Really, really focus on what you can offer them, but maybe they're just not the right company for you, and you will find that right place that can invest in you and can help you transfer. And finally, do show your skills a bit. So do a couple of projects, put them on GitHub, show that you can learn, that you can think critically, and that you can communicate. So why did you choose that project? Why did you use that approach? What are the limitations of your approach? You didn't spend that much time on it, maybe, because it's a project to get a job. What would you do next time? What would you do if you had more time? If I look at a project, I want to see that somebody can learn and is inventive and is really passionate about what they do. So that is what I wanted to say, and thank you so much. I'm going to do something slightly unusual, which is another one of my incredible colleagues, Amy Rimmer, was really excited about being here today, but has just come down with a terrible bout of sickness and couldn't actually be here. So if it's okay, I'm just going to read out a little thing that she wrote because she still wanted to contribute. So Amy's been at Oxa for nearly 2 years. She works in the controls team. And before that, she actually worked at Jaguar Land Rover for 7 years on autonomous vehicle research, which is amazing. She's got a PhD and a master's in engineering, but she didn't have much experience in C++ and Python before moving to Oxa. So these are Amy's words. So hi, I'm Amy, and I work in the controls team at Oxa. What we do is take a desired path. Where do we want the vehicle to go? And we work out the vehicle commands required for the vehicle to follow that path. And we also handle the integration for a wide variety of platforms and whether the system is actually autonomous or not. So it's fun because you can really see the tangible output from your work. My day might consist of coding, looking at data, writing design documents, as well as meetings, always meetings. I always spend as much time reviewing other people's code and documents as I do writing them. A little summary of my career and how I came to be working in tech. I did a mechanical engineering degree and went to work for Rolls-Royce on their graduate scheme. So I learned a lot there, but I didn't see a future. So I went back to uni to do a PhD in autonomous vehicle control of lorries. I was the first woman to do a PhD with my supervisor, who specialized in lorries, and it was a huge learning curve in implementing control algorithms on a full-sized vehicle. Afterwards, I went to work with Jaguar Land Rover in the autonomous vehicle research. Whilst there, I worked on lots of different autonomous vehicle prototypes. Through my career, even as far back as undergrad, I had used MATLAB, which is a scripting language, and Simulink, which is a graphical programming language, a bit like Scratch, but I hadn't used Python or C++ very much. And when I applied for OXA, I was totally honest about this, and they still wanted to recruit me for my experience in autonomous vehicle integration, and they use MATLAB and Simulink as well. Since joining OXA nearly 2 years ago, I have learned so much, not only Python and C++, but also general design principles. Anyway, I just wanted to say that it really doesn't matter what path you have taken, as long as you're keen to learn. Throughout my career, I've worked with people with such a variety of career paths, and we've all ended up in the same place eventually. So if you want to become a developer and work in tech, you definitely can. And yeah, I'm so glad I learned that. I learned some really great stuff about Amy, and I thought that was amazing. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I will say goodbye.
Thank you so much, Lane. That was so interesting. And it's so interesting to hear as well that obviously you transitioned into tech, and both yourself and Amy have some very impressive qualifications under your belt. And Amy mentioned a variety of career paths as well. Lane, can I ask you out of curiosity, what did you think of the industry before you came in? Did you know there was going to be that much opportunity available to you?
No, not at all.
I hear that often, isn't it? Yeah.
I was shocked.
Yeah. It's always interesting to hear when people transfer into the tech industry, what they thought of it and before they came in. Thank you so much, Lane, for sharing your story and for sharing Amy's incredible story as well. We wish her well, obviously. We're going to hand over now to Dan from Founders and Coders, who is going to talk a little bit about training and education. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. You know, after listening to Lane, I was thinking, I've got a little slide deck which I'm going to share with you in just a second. I was toying with the idea of changing a couple of my slides in response to some of the things that Lane said, but I think maybe that's a little bit too ambitious. So instead, I'm going to open the deck now. Hopefully, you'll be able to see it. That's not the one we wanted, so give me a second. That's the one we wanted. Actually, no. Let me try again. Let's see if this now works. Yes, that's what we wanted. Phew. Okay, so I just want to talk briefly. I think we can go through this relatively quickly. So I'm Dan from Founders and Coders. I've been slated to talk about training and education, which is what Founders and Coders does. So the first thing I wanted to say about training in this field is don't pay. There are a lot of paid options, but at the moment it's not really necessary. In the slides I was going to add, and instead I'm just going to speak to them. And it's just what you've been talking about people's career paths, and although this year is a slightly challenging year in software development, the big tech has been laying off people, and that has had a short-term effect. I don't expect that to last forever. In fact, there are already signs that is shifting. But the really important thing to be aware of is whatever your background, there are opportunities to get into particularly software engineering related fields, no matter what your background is and no matter what your level of education is. And even if you're starting from ground zero, which you may or may not be, there is no reason why you should have to pay for a route into the industry. In particular, I wanted to talk about the government skills bootcamp program, or at least I'm not going to talk about it, I'm just going to refer to it. There but thanks to generous funding from the government, there are a number of free courses around on cloud engineering, data engineering, software development, and a whole bunch of related fields. And as a result, there are a lot of training organizations, ourselves included, who are running skills boot camps. And those are all free at the point of delivery. Here's a link, which I'm sure we'll be able to share later. But there are a lot of offerings, a lot of those are online. Some are part-time and some are full-time. And to be honest, mileage varies quite a lot. So do shop around. There are a lot of opportunities in all of these fields. Some of them are really worth the time, and you won't have to pay anything for them. And they are designed to be a first step on the road to a viable career in software development and related fields. The second thing I wanted to talk about, or at least refer to, is that you should not underestimate apprenticeships as a route into a lot of these software related fields. They are great if you can get them. That doesn't mean there are a lot of apprenticeship opportunities around, but if you can find one that suits you, it's really worth going for, because they're not just free. I mean, it's not just a free training, but you get paid to learn, which, you know, given the other possible training routes, that's not to be sniffed at. And again, a lot of companies that do apprenticeships, companies that you might well want to work for, and many of the trainings that come with those apprenticeship opportunities are good trainings. And so I would say, what's not to like? There are other options as well. It's not just about skills boot camps. It's not just about apprenticeships, although I'm particularly fond of both of those routes. Paid coding boot camps, I think I wanted to mention them just in order to really recommend that you don't go for a paid coding boot camp. There are a whole bunch of these options. Coding boot camps first emerged in Northern California about 12 years ago, because there was such a screaming shortage of software engineers around Silicon Valley that this kind of interesting idea of paying or charging people who wanted to get in the industry to get up to just about the right level that they could get their first job in the industry, that became a viable option. It worked for some people, and it worked at some times in some parts of the world where the demand was so great that even a short sort of 12 or 16-week training could get you into the industry. That is still true to some extent, although this year less than others, and there are still some very good coding boot camps around, but there are also very good other options, and you really ought to explore the other options before you start putting money on the table. University is also worth talking about. Obviously, there are many very good undergraduate degrees in all of the engineering disciplines. If you're in a position to do an undergraduate degree, that is obviously worth considering. Also, don't, particularly again, this is more in software engineering than in other fields, but there are a number of really quite good master's conversion degrees. So in other words, if you already have a first degree that is in a field that has absolutely nothing to do with software engineering, there are some good conversion degrees. Imperial has a particularly good one with a high reputation, but there are many others to look at, and they are definitely a sensible route. Obviously, this is a paid for route, so I would say the same thing applies to a degree as it would to any other form of paid educational training. Do your research and be very clear that it's right for you, and the institution will offer you what you need. But that's university. I also wanted to say a really quick word about generative AI. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because it is already having quite an impact on the industry, and what the shape of that impact is going to be is not entirely clear. But what I can say for certain is I already know a lot of software developers that are using these tools. There is quite a lot of research going on, not all of it ad hoc, some of it, quite well researched, that suggests that now the majority of software developers in some form are using generative AI to support their work. So many software developers and those in related fields are already making themselves more productive. I mean, this will have an effect in terms of if somebody is more efficient at something, if the amount of work stays the same, then you need less people to do the work. But the history of improvements in productivity going right back to the Industrial Revolution implies that when you get more productive, it means that it creates more demand. And I think, we don't know this, but I think that is going to be the case with software engineering and related fields, that although we're all going to get quite a bit more productive over the next 2 or 3 years, that is going to create its own demand. So I would say there is an opportunity here for people wanting to get into the industry. I think maybe the gap has narrowed between a lazy and experienced software engineer and someone who is single-minded but inexperienced. I think these tools really can help you, not just to build software, but to support your own learning. They're not a panacea. They're not going to change everything, but it feels, to those of us that remember when Google first arrived on the scene and how much easier that made it to research things we didn't understand or to work out why there were bugs in our code. This feels a lot like that to me, only it feels like it's even more useful. And so it looks to me like the sort of jump in productivity that we got then in the late 90s and early 2000s is going to be greater this time around. So it's a real opportunity for people that are joining the industry for the first time, I think. Finally, an advert from Founders and Coders. If you are interested in any software engineering fields and you're London-based, you may want to join our community, join our Discord server, come along to our meetups in Finsbury Park. That's it. I won't say any more about us, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dan. I can vouch for Founders and Coders. You do have fabulous programs and meetups. And I love the fact that you stress that you don't have to pay for training. You talking about advertising now, I'm going to do a shameless plug for our podcast on SheCanCode. We have a podcast, Spilling the Tea, and the amount of ladies on there that say it is such a gamble when you start paying out money and time to learn something that you might not actually follow through as a career in any way. So as you said, you don't have to pay for great training, and there are lots of other options, obviously Founders and Coders being one of them, and the direction obviously to go in. So thank you so much, Dan, for that. And we're going to move on to what employers are looking for, and we have the fabulous Shelley from Oxa who's going to tell us about that.
Hi, thanks, Kaylee, and hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and certainly taking time out ahead of International Women in Engineering Day tomorrow. Quick introduction for myself. My name is Shelley Vasey, and I work with Oxa currently as their Global Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Director. I've worked within IT services and consulting since leaving university, from some really big IT resellers across managed services and professional services organisations through to tiny little software startups, certainly focused within their talent acquisition function. I've been with Oxa for about 4.5 years now, and I switched into a full-time diversity role early this year. So as I mentioned, I've been with Oxa for 4.5 years. I was employee number 79, and I've worked with our focus groups, or our voice groups as they're known within the business, our recruitment leads and leaders over that time, and really now enjoy seeing a 50-50% gender diversity split within our corporate and customer operations teams. And also, quite notably, a 19% increase in our team members that identify as females across our engineering teams. So just a note, I share my own personal thoughts. Anybody that knows me knows I'm quite opinionated and quite loud and quite vivacious about all things diversity. So they are my lived experiences, and I'm representing my own personal opinions only today. So Kaylee, you posted a question. What are employers looking for in engineering talent? Let me answer that with some high-level suggestions. So first off, for me, it's not about qualifications and work experience only. Okay, that's part of it. But there is a huge world out there that we as employers look for that complement those qualifications and work experience. So if this is your first job, or if you're a career switcher such as Lane, and I recruited Lane, just saying, before your application submission, ahead of any interviews, do your research. Okay, understand the engineering tech that you're inspired by, that gets you out of bed, that makes you sparkle every morning. Oxford, for example, believe that autonomous vehicle technology will help us unlock a safer, cleaner, and more sustainable future for everyone. If that resonates with you, explore a career in EV, AV, or CAV technologies. Don't just sit there and think, okay, what do I want to do? Go out there and research it. Go out there and look at, even before you've applied, what really gets you out of bed, what resonates with you, what do you think internally about what you want to achieve, what's your footprint in the world. So think about also personal projects you've completed. And I want to give you an example here. We recently recruited, or the TA function recently recruited, a female graduate that was studying artificial intelligence and robotics. She's got no coding experience, zero. Okay, so keep that in mind with this story. So as a team member, she was part of a team of 4. She won the MA Challenge this year, so the 2023 MA Challenge. So the Society of Maritime Industries, or SMI for short, facilitated the change and supported the project. And an initial interview, she quite openly said, I've got no coding experience whatsoever, but since I was 7 years old, I've watched the Oxford vehicles drive around the Oxford circuit, and I just find it fascinating. And the energy and the enthusiasm that she spoke about this project and her journey through Aberystwyth University spiked everyone's interest. She now has a role on our graduate recruitment scheme. So another one for me is around attitude. Attitude matters. Okay, think about engineering as a whole. What does a career in engineering mean to you? Take a moment when this taster session finishes to think about and write that answer down. Think about what a career in engineering means to you. For me, if I was focused on, I recruit within, and I'm a diversity specialist within the engineering and tech space. For me, it's about looking for innovation, the ability to work as a team member, analytical ability, and creativity. So Kaylee, I just wanted to unpick each one of those really quickly, super fast. Innovation. Engineering, okay, is one of the biggest, most exciting parts. So innovation, for a big part of engineering, is about solving problems and coming up with new solutions. Teamwork. Let's face it, whatever role you take in engineering, the likelihood of you working on your own for too long is pretty slim. In fact, it's pretty non-existent. So engineering is all about collaboration. Engineering also, it's quite rewarding and an exciting career. It can be lucrative, with some of the highest paid salaries paid in the UK, according to research conducted by Indeed of 2022. Next, we have analytical ability. So analytical skills, okay, are crucial, in my opinion, for engineers, allowing them to evaluate a project, to decide whether it's possible, to decide whether it's safe, to decide whether it's proceedable. Lane mentioned meeting after meeting after meeting. Is this project going to work? And those analytical skills for an engineer give them the ability to examine their work and that of others and determine the best course of action. So analytical ability. And then for me personally, it's about being creative. It's being creative with your own brand, your own persona, as we call it. So the ability to make or otherwise bring into existence something new. Whether it's a solution to a problem, a new method, or an approach to delivering a fix or a device. Creativity. So at Oxa, for example, none of us, okay, have the answer to level 5 autonomy. Nobody in the world, okay? It's the holy grail. It's everything that we're all looking for. So driver out technology with no human intervention, it's level 5 autonomy. Nobody knows the answer. But that's what we work every day, every minute to try to solve. So be creative, detail things like projects, and Lane touched on this, volunteering commitments, showcase your brand. So talk about YouTube, talk about your GitHub channels, and ask yourself lots of questions, engineering questions. Engineers question everything, in my opinion, like literally everything. So don't lose sight of that inquiring mind. I think, Kaylee, for me, lastly, I'd also like you all to think about paying forwards. I follow an individual called Jay Shetty, and he talks about the 4 pillars of life. And the 4th pillar for him is giving back. It's what can you add as an engineer to the world? What can I pay forwards to those around me and give back to society from a socioeconomic position, from a tech position, to my children. I've got 4 children, but what can I do for them for the future? So what can you pay forwards? What can you raise the bar on? And apply that to a company profile that you're interested in. So in short, my takeaways are these. It's not just about qualifications and experience. Shout from the rooftops about your personal engineering project. You are your biggest ambassador. Use a voice and shout about your own personal projects. Your attitude matters. Innovation, teamwork, and analytical skills, including creativity, for me, are super important. And ultimately, for me, come as you are. Your uniqueness and individuality is your superpower, so use it. Just come as you are. And if there are companies out there that won't engage with, I don't have 20 years of C++ experience, I don't have 5 years worth of Python experience, oh well, that's your loss, that's not ours. And Lane and Amy, I use them too as 2 personal experiences that I can really share with you guys. By their own admittance, they were really honest at their interviews, and they came across as that I want to pay forwards. I want to do something with a tech that is changing the world. So question, what can you pay forwards? That's me.
Thank you so much, Shelley. And I'm so pleased that you mentioned that it is attitude, because it's something actually on our webinars we get asked a lot. We actually got this asked yesterday, and we had a webinar about software engineering, and it did come up. People do worry, if I don't have the experience, how do I get noticed? And again, it was asked on our Q&A, and as you just made clear there, that good employers, they are looking for more than just qualifications and the experience. As long as you've got the good attitude, great employers will still give you a chance. It's
sassy, it's sparkle, it's standing out. And just because you've got X amount of qualifications or no qualifications, it doesn't matter. It's your attitude, it's what you bring from a culture perspective that's super important, not only to us, but also many organisations that I've worked with.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Shelley, for sharing that. We are nearly running out of time, but we have another fabulous talk now from Daisy from Wave Talent. Daisy, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you. Hard to follow from that one, Shelley. I was very motivated. But yeah, I completely agree with everything you had to say there. And I think just also on that last point that you mentioned around experience, not only like qualifications and coming into the industry, but also moving from like one tech stack to the other and having the confidence to do that. You don't have to always stay in one direction and one path through your career. And I work with a lot of clients now that don't just hire for one skill set, they'll hire for how they can see they hire for how adaptable you are and how able you are to be able to pick up those skills and move into that role, as opposed to what you were doing before. So yeah, very reliable. I can completely agree with what you have to say there. But moving on from that and over to myself. So I work over at an agency called Wave Talent. Just as a bit of a background, as to who I am. I've been there, working in tech recruitment now for about 5 years. In terms of over at Wave, and what we cover is across engineering, which is software engineering, data, and DevOps, SRE as well, and we cover product and design as well. I actually have always worked in contract recruitment, so typically I'll help companies on an interim basis to scale up a team quickly to deliver a specific project of work. But I've always worked very closely with our permanent teams who hire for permanent engineers, designers, or product leads, and everything from whether you're working as a contractor or you're a permanent employee. In terms of what we look for as a recruiter, it's all very similar. So I wanted to kind of share some experiences from my side and just a few kind of tips and tricks to help you out, whether you're getting into your first role in tech, whether you're looking to move into a different position, and hopefully it can help. So I think a good place to start would be when talking around your kind of profile, your CV and your LinkedIn, your GitHub. It's really important, that kind of first impression working as a recruiter. And unfortunately, I think what you'll kind of realize is working in the industry, it's a blessing and a curse, because you'll always be in demand. So probably going to always have recruiters wanting to contact you. You always have recruiters that will be interested to talk. There's a lot of good recruiters out there that really understand what what they're looking for and what skill sets required. But also there is recruiters out there that haven't necessarily got that kind of level of understanding, because as much as I don't like to say we're not necessarily the technical experts, you are. So for me, I think a good bit of advice to start with is to be kind of as clear as possible as you can be with your profile. What I mean by that is having like a CV or your LinkedIn that reads well is really important. So I think when you're looking at projects that you've worked in or companies that you've worked for, be specific on it, exactly what it was that you've kind of impacted within that role and what technologies you've worked with, as opposed to kind of listing off every single technology you've had exposure to over there in the past. It's really helpful to see kind of where your specialist skills lie within that area, if it's the case that you're obviously looking to continue on down that path. And for recruiters, a really good way for us to kind of understand and to see you as a person and how kind of I guess how good you are is how well you can make us understand what it is that you do. So how well you can break down from your profile what it is that you was able to achieve within that position, and to understand from our side, how you achieved it and what you worked with and how you used those technologies. I think being able to actually kind of walk through that and to demonstrate that, it's really great for us to see it, and it's what recruiters will be looking for, that you can actually talk through your experience as opposed to just kind of going high level. So I think just having that confidence to do so is always really great. I think with regards to when you're kind of talking with recruiters, it can be as little as when you're initially getting to know recruiters who are speaking to them around a role, suggest to have a video call, try to get on video calls with us, get to know us a bit better. It's a great way to, first of all, practice, ahead of jumping onto interviews and video calls. It's not then a completely new concept for you if it is, your first position, or even if it's not, it's always good to just speak to people around your experience. And the more you're kind of talking around what you've done in the past, the more kind of warmed up you are ahead of interview processes. So you feel a lot more comfortable going into it. I think as well, it's always really great to get to know from a personal perspective a bit about yourself, what you enjoy, how you enjoy to solve problems creatively, what types of industries you're, as Shelley said, really excite you and get you up, and out of bed in the morning. I think something to note in this industry is you're probably likely to have long-term relationships with recruiters, because you probably will move on from the roles that you're in. You might want to get into contracting one day, or you're working with recruiters all the time, or having long-standing relationships with recruiters is really important. And us being able to know you better and more personally, we'll be able to ultimately support you and help you through your journey, through moving into positions, because we understand exactly what it is you're looking for, and we might be able to point you in the right direction of what types of companies would be a good match for you because of what you enjoy, even if it's down to hobbies, for example. So I think being able to kind of get on a level and just sort of break down those barriers and get to know recruiters you work with personally as well is always really great to have. Personal relationships are so important in this space. I think something that's really important when you're going through interview processes is not to be afraid to be vulnerable and to express any concerns that you do have. So, if it is the case that you're not completely sold on certain parts of the company that you're interviewing for, or, you had an interview and you thought it went well, but, maybe there was a few things that was mentioned that left you thinking after you came out of the interview, I'd always say express that and talk about it, because it's something that we can help with. It's something that we can squash, and it's something that being able to be open and communicate kind of clearly through the process how you're feeling as you go through ultimately won't only help you, because we can sort of give advice and could sort of consult along the way, but it will also help us to adjust the process where we need to understand better what your concerns are, and ultimately figure out if it is the right opportunity for you or not. So I think just kind of having a relationship where you can be open, communicate clearly, and we can sort of work together on figuring out whether it's a good opportunity or whether we can find something better. So just being able to be open and honest is really great. I think also kind of just lastly, something that's always really great as recruiters to hear and to talk about is when we can kind of see a real interest in the companies, the clients we're working with, and that we're sort of putting people forward to. I think sort of being really curious about what the plan, the company plans are, really what you can kind of what you can really impact within the business, and just figuring out kind of where, coming into a new role, where that would leave you, what it is that would be kind of expected of you, and just really understanding and being curious around what you can impact for that position is always really great. I think being passionate and really caring about the process that you're going through is always really important for us to see. And of course, for yourself as well, you obviously want to be passionate for the processes that you're in and the companies that you're going for. And if you're not, then it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might not just be the right opportunity for you. So just being able to identify that, and I think all in all, just being able to have like a great relationship where you can just express freely how you're feeling, talk about your experience openly, talk about solutions and make us kind of better understand more around your positions, what you've worked on, so that we can best reflect your profile and your experience to the companies and the clients that we work with as well. So I guess that's sort of high level, a bit of advice and tips and tricks. Hope that it could be helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Daisy. I love the fact that you kicked off with just being clear on your CV about who you are and what you do. That's something that we don't do well sometimes. Some applicants don't do well. I think it's a CV is something that perhaps we, maybe put together in the early 2000s and haven't gone back and reviewed, other than what our next job was. Do you see that often? Do you find that people just don't update their CVs very well, or they might just throw on their last job title and that's it?
Yeah, I do. I see, and funnily enough, I mean, a lot of clients that we work with, if they look at CVs and they're past sort of 3-page point and 6-7 pages long, clients, they lose interest. They want to see, they want it to be to the point, clear, precise, and it is so important because ultimately it is first impressions. So I think just be able to have a clear profile, and I'd always just say with technologies, just try to be precise on the key technologies you have been working with as opposed to every single one, just so that recruiters and clients can see clearly where your specialists skills lie and what could be good for you internally within that company.
Yes, Daisy, someone has put in the Q&A that your session has been so helpful, Daisy, and that they have a career gap on their CV. They struggle how to put a positive spin on it. Any tips if you have a gap in your CV? As Shelley was saying, it's not just about experience and qualifications. What happens if you have a gap?
I think there's I think having a gap in your CV, it's, some people have personal situations that happen. You might want to travel for a while. There's nothing wrong in having a gap that's there, but I think just being able to put in the CV, what it was. So obviously if it's something personal, you don't have to include anything like that, but I just think if you're traveling, if you've come from maternity leave, being able to put that in just so that people can see. But also within that time where you had a gap, if you was taking a different career for a little while, or if you was taking some time for yourself, just put that in and be
Oh, are we still live?
We are live. I think we just lost Daisy. I'm not
Daisy?
sure what happened. We just lost Daisy. She might come back in a second. Dan, I saw that you answered the question for Daisy as well about gaps on your CV, and that your answer was don't draw attention to it, but have a good one-line response in case it does come up. I suppose that is great advice, isn't it? In case it does come up in the interview, as Daisy was saying, just be honest about what it is and why you have that gap on your CV, I suppose is the trick there, isn't it, Dan?
Sorry about that, my laptop died.
That's okay.
And I think also, Katie, just to answer here, if you've got an organisation that quizzes you and queries you about why did you have a career gap, what was the details, are those really the types of organisations you want to be working for in the first place?
Yeah.
Because with 4 children, I got a lot of career gaps. I should have got a telly earlier. But at the end of the day, I now wouldn't explain away why I did the best job in the world, which was being a mum. So I think you've got to also question, and it goes back to that innovation, that creativity. If you've got an organisation that's really quizzing you on why did you have this gap to go travelling or have a child or whatever, house renovations, is that really the type of organisation you want to work with anyway?
Yeah, because I can see a couple of people in here put questions for you, Shelley, as well about your session. And there was someone in here saying, they're quite shy, they're not sure how to stand out in an interview, and somebody else was asking, they struggle with asking really good questions at the end of interviews. But actually, it works both ways, doesn't it? You want to know you want to ask that employer questions about what it would be like to work at that company. As well as you said, it's not just whether or not they're interviewing you, it's the other way around.
I think something to just note here, in our industry where we talk about deep and disruptive tech, we have a huge amount of neurodivergence, okay, and we've done many a seminar on this in the past. We have lots of introverts, lots of extroverts, we have lots of red and amber, blues and greens personality, and no one personality type is any better or any worse than the others. All personality types are needed within the engineering world because of those creativity, innovation, because of those skills. And I've now got some internet troubles. So I think what we've got to just retain here is, although the person's shyness, they might see as a negative, actually, when you think about team collaboration, shyness and waiting to put your opinion forwards, it's actually a positive, not a negative. So it's that ability to you know, in the ratio of using 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that ratio. So shyness is not actually, you know, a negative or a debilitating situation if you use it in the right way. And the questions, somebody asked about the questions to ask an organization, I'm more than happy to share that in a one-to-one session with whoever put that post on there to help them, because literally I've heard it all in 25 years. Some of the questions I've been asked are just wonderful. And these people have got those roles in, you know, in their sessions.
Daisy, do you help screen these questions at all as a recruiter? Do you prep your candidates before they reach the employer, or do they
I've never worked. I've
what?
never worked in an agency, so I've never worked the other side of the desk, as we call it. So if I was to prep a candidate, I'd actually be telling them how to answer me. So that just wouldn't work as a TA specialist. There are situations where I've got to know a person really, really well, but I also know the hiring manager really well. And when you're doing candidate prep, your recruiter, so Daisy, should really get under the skin of that person that is recruiting you. So they will know what types of skills, what types of personality traits, what types of things like brand and leadership principles that business has. So ask those questions of the recruiters as well. And the good recruiters out there will know what types of personalities the hiring manager has, 2.4 children, a dog and a cat, and whether they like shoes or not. It's building your tribe around you for the end goal of getting yourself that role.
Yes, definitely. Daisy, is that something that you agree with when you prep candidates? Do you work with them on questions, or as Shelley said, it's not just about the questions, is it? It's about showing off your personality and the whole you.
Yeah, of course. I think the main thing and a big part of my job is really understanding the client that I'm working with and what their needs are and what they're looking for. So when I am speaking with candidates and I'm prepping them for the interviews, you know, I'm express to them exactly, you know, what the type of culture is within the business, what the type of people, you know, what type of people they are looking for and what's important to them, you know, what values they have. So without kind of giving them, you know, a list of questions to ask, kind of giving them that opportunity with enough information there to use their initiative to kind of ask the right questions, but, you know, having enough information there for them to be able to ask openly the right questions within an interview. So
yes, definitely. And Lane, I can see somebody's got a question in here for you about, you know, being in engineering. It's a very male-dominated industry, and somebody was wondering how you deal with that. You said that you're quite lucky to have a really supportive network and some lovely colleagues. Can you expand a little bit more on your answer in there?
Yeah. So I think I've always worked in male-dominated fields mostly. I guess when I was in archaeological science, it was more of a split that you would expect, you know, 50-50. But then I ended up doing a lot of field work in Saudi Arabia, where I would be the only woman on a team of like 11 or 12 guys. And so I love where I've ended up, because people like Shelley really are making a legitimate effort to have more women, to support the women that are already at OXA, to have our voices be heard and end up eventually influencing company policy, which I guess is where you want to get to. If something doesn't work right for everyone at the company, you want to try to make as many people as happy as they can be. And I think Shelley does a great job of balancing what she hears from the employees and, you know, what the company needs. And but it still can get depressing. Not like individual colleagues, the company is wonderful, but the state of the world can be dark. Can be dark some days. And yeah, I just have friends I can blow off steam with. I have female friends who are also engineers. If you don't happen to know people through like just people you've happened to meet, you know, I think with social media, there are so many places where you could try and actually get some of those networks professionally as well. If you don't have a company where they already have those voice groups in place for you to have a voice, if you have the time and you have the support from the company, just set up a small one if you possibly can and see what happens. I think people will love it and embrace it.
Yes, and just being at the right company, as you said, it can really help if you don't have a network. Having a safe space to create a network that helps, but your choice in employer can obviously really help with your mental health and how you deal with the different things in the industry. We are almost out of time, but I can see one last question in here that was very interesting. Dan, I noticed you answered it. Somebody was asking about coding boot camps via degree. You also spoke a little bit about apprenticeships, and you said here that it's your experience that most software companies are less interested in qualifications, as Shelley has also touched upon as well. I agree. There is this misconception, isn't there, from people outside of the tech industry, thinking that you have to have these very shiny, impressive qualifications even to enter, and it is such a shame that people think that, because obviously, as we've discussed throughout this, you can get into tech in several different routes. Is that something that you would agree with, Dan? That people have that misconception, don't they, that you have to have the big hitting computer science degree and that's it?
Yeah, let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with a big hitting computer science degree. However, it's well known, although I think mileage varies on this, it's well known that unemployment among graduates in software related fields is quite high. And one of the reasons for that is that although a degree is valuable, if you don't have the other attributes needed by would-be employers, then the degree is not going to help you. And the other attributes are really more valuable, however helpful a degree might be.
Yes, I agree. It takes more, as Shelley has said throughout this as well, it just takes a really good attitude. And if you have a really good attitude, we encourage you obviously to go for a career in tech. You would be welcome with open arms by the industry. We are out of time, I am afraid. The hour has flown by. So thank you so much to Lane, Shelley, Dan and Daisy. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights today. It's been a pleasure having you with us. And to all of our listeners, as always, thank you for joining us. We will upload a recording of this tomorrow on SheCanCode.io to share with our community, and get over there to see all the wonderful resources that we have. If you're thinking about training, there are lots of resources on there that you can access, and we hope to see you again at our next webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for the invite.
Bye. Thank you.